Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone's week has been productive and, I suppose, enjoyable. I hope you guys have just been knocking it out of the park this week. You know, getting shit done, kicking ass, taking names and kicking ass. Whatever order you so decide to go into with that. So yeah. Good morning and welcome, lurking and listening, but also working. Well, good morning, Mystic. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Nice to see you in one of these. Very good to see you. So this morning, what we're going to be talking about is somebody sent me in the community sent me a video. Don't actually remember what the video is called, but the context of the video is exactly what it is that we're going to be talking about this morning. So, yet again, the Christians are on one. And it always seems like it's like the one particular group of Christians. I do want to kind of specify, because we do have a community member by the name of Mark 5, which is like our resident Christian, and he's an Eastern Orthodox Christian. He's a great guy, you know. Really, really, look at that, my lovely wife, laying on the couch, and in the chat. So Mark 5 is great. He's an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and I have wonderful conversations about philosophy and theology with that man. No negativity towards him, but there is a particular group or groups of Christians that seem to be the majority of them. You have the evangelical far right, the Christian nationalists, and as always, they are on one. They're on a kick once again. And I didn't want to react to the video. Like, I don't want to do video reactions, but this is a reaction to a video. It's kind of more like an essay, I suppose, like in response to that video, essentially talking about exactly what it is. We're talking about some type of global satanic empire that, pushes forward, child trafficking and things like that. This video is not going to be able to be, I'm not going to be able to monetize this video because of the context of what we're talking about, but I'm also not the type of person. I'm not going to change words to make people comfortable. Like, I'm not going to do that. I think, in the context of, like, I grew up in an era where if you talk about something and it makes you uncomfortable, it is probably something that you need to you need to face. And if a conversation like this makes someone uncomfortable, unfortunately, this is the reality of the world that we live in, isn't it? So yes, we are debunking the global Satanic Empire, and there's a big thing that I need to preface with this episode before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it. At no point in this episode are we going to be like victim blaming. That's not a thing. Child abuse is real, and at no point are we going to, be victim blaming or, trying to contradict people's claims to child abuse. What we're talking about is the context and what is relevant in those cases. Now, all of the sources, this is something I'm going to be doing with every episode of this now. If it's not an opinion piece, if there are sources that I'm quoting, All sources are in the description. It's a bit of a pain in the ass to start shooting sources into the chat. So if you go into the description, there is a section called sources. Everything that I've looked up and used for the production and making of this episode is in the description. Okay, so the difference between evil acts and evil branding, right? Real abuse, it is real. A global monolithic satanic empire running child death matches in Manhattan nightclubs. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. So let's sort facts from fear. That's what we're doing. So what we're going to start out with first and foremost is what words actually mean, right? So the first words that we're going to be defining, because as any argument, definitions are important. So occult, occultism, right? Academic category of esoteric tradition, largely 19th, 20th century Western esotericism, not a synonym for crime. Good morning, disciple. I have seen you. I just needed to, get the intro going there. So welcome. Now, Satanism, ignoring the nuances of, theistic Satanism, things like that, for the purposes of having definitions or having something defined for the conversation today, is specifically Church of Satan, non-theistic adversarial philosophy. Despite edgy aesthetics, the founder framed it as materialist, atheist, not a crime syllabus. And when we say the founder, we're talking about Anton LaVey, right? The Satanic Temple, non-theistic, IRS recognized church, emphasizes bodily autonomy, compassion, justice. You may roll your eyes, but those are the published tenets, right? That is what is published on the website, right? So beliefs and aesthetics aren't felonies. Actions are. So this is an important thing. So most of these Christians that attack people in the occult, attack Satanism, Satanists, things of that nature, are doing so because for them, what we embody is edgy to them. It's an instant click because a lot of people are still afraid of what it is that we believe in, right? And then when you get somebody like me, which I believe in it theistically, and then I aesthetically fit the bill, and like I think many of us do still, we're the perfect targets, right? Scapegoat, exactly. And there's just this, popular kind of ideal of just talking about some, cinematic, satanic underbelly of the world that controls everything, which I just find fucking funny. The fucking Illuminati on like another level type shit. It's just kind of ridiculous, right? So what this particular video that I watched and we talked, that I listened to, talks about is satanic ritual abuse, is what it talks about. Child abuse perpetrated for the purposes of satanic ritual. And as someone that has suffered child abuse, and I'm a big proponent, for protecting children that are in abusive situations. I found it rather disgusting because as someone that is also, of the left-hand path, and sometimes, objectively identified as a Satanist. People just like to slap me with that because it just fits, I guess, and it's easier than explaining the nuances of what I actually believe in. The video particularly, very specifically, talks about like children growing up in satanic families, right? And what triggers my brain with that is, you cringe when you're called a Satanist? Yeah. Same, but it's just, you just kind of have to roll with it, I suppose. But what really kind of bothers me with it is because I'm someone that's on the left-hand path, I am a father. Content like that immediately frames people like myself, or even Dyra for that matter, as people that are inherently unfit to be parents, right? Or even potentially dangerous to be parents because of what we believe in. And so the phrase satanic ritual abuse, someone that is abusing children abuses children, regardless of the context in which they abuse their child. Christians use Christianity as an excuse for abuse, capital punishment, in the household, right? Spare the rod, spare the child, right? Type shit. And so to sit there and frame, child abuse as something that is inherently satanic, or perpetrated because of Satanism, or the belief in Satanism, or that abusing a child is, somehow used as ritual is disgusting. And especially because most of these people are framing everything around like the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple. And I can grab the Satanic Bible right now and I can go right to the page where Anton LaVey in the Satanic Bible put that harming children and animals and things of that are not, it's not part of the program, right? It's not part of the belief system, right? And a very eloquent, explanation as to why it's not. And then, the Satanic Temple, their tenets are, publicly available and completely contrary to that. So the two points that most of these people want to cite as being, well, look, there's a Church of Satan, and oh, look, there's the Satanic Temple. You can tell that these people apparently don't know how to use fucking Google, because they don't know a fucking thing about the shit that they're actually talking about. Now, the facts, okay? So the FBI's Kenneth Lanning did the landmark analysis. Decades of investigation turned up no corroborating evidence for an organized transnational satanic cult abusing children as part of religious rites. He urged investigators to stick to verifiable facts and avoid ritual labels that bias cases. Okay, so there's already been an FBI study on this stuff, right? So what I want this video to be, what I want this podcast to be today is I want this to be a reference point for, like, if this argument for some reason comes up in your life, like, you can reference this video, like, for the actual facts, okay? Now, a famous satanic panic case, McMartin Preschool, right? 7 years, $15 million, wall-to-wall media, 0 convictions. Later recantations pointed to suggestive interviewing and hysteria. Right, so that's a case that a lot of people like to use, right, in reference to, like, well, look, I mean, this happened. This was a public case. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever came from it. Okay. So it's religious abuse. I mean that's an accurate. I believe that is an accurate phrase to use. Anytime a religion is used to excuse abusing a child, it is religious abuse. Now, to specifically label the religion, I don't think that is inherently important, right? Um, and the reason I don't think that is important is because the religion is the excuse, it's the reasoning, but it isn't a justification. It might be a justification for the person, but it's not it's not a justification. And to try to frame it specifically, right, is to imply that this religion or this spirituality inherently supports or condones that behavior. All of us here know that it doesn't, right? It doesn't support that behavior. But it is a justification for the people perpetrating the abuse at the time. But people like that will always try to find a justification. Evil people will find reasons to justify evil acts, right? Regardless of what religion they believe in. It doesn't matter if they're Muslim, they're Jewish, they're Satanists, they're Christians, Buddhist, it doesn't matter, right? That they will find some way, right, to justify being pieces of shit, and a lot of times people use their religion to do that, So I think general just religious abuse is, makes more sense to me, right? Because, I mean, you say satanic ritual abuse, but then, with the Christians, what is that? It's just religious abuse. It's using your religion to abuse somebody, right? So, moving on. So memory science also matters, right? So recovered memory crusades fueled false accusations. Leading researchers like Elizabeth Loftus showed how malleable memory is. Courts learn this the hard way, right? So again, all of the sources that I'm citing are in the description, right? So if you need a source, you can go pull it from there, okay? So this is another thing. Your memory of events and situations aren't necessarily trustworthy. They can be manipulated and moved and changed, and how we remember things usually isn't accurate. There's a reason why, in relationships, right? A lot of people would say, when there's problems in a relationship, there's they always say there's his story, her story, and then what actually happened. Because how you recall things are going to be beneficial to your own memory, right? So, there's what one person says, what another person says, and then what the reality of the situation would actually happened. So yes, memory is malleable, and again, this is a study that's been done, and so again, courts kind of learned that okay, we can't really go off of what people are saying that they remember when they're coerced to remember things in this particular way. Government academic reviews in the United States and the United Kingdom and the Netherlands repeated findings of no evidence for organized satanic networks conducting ritual child murder. Where ritual elements appeared, they were incidental to already criminal abuse, not part of a coherent religion-mandated system. Remember last time. Exactly. Memory does skew. Does, right? So again, so here we have like several governments, right? Specifically the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands. And I think that this is particularly important, okay? Because what this particular point here lays out for us, okay, is where ritual elements appeared, because a lot of people are going to ask that question. So, like, and just like that Summer Witch just kind of asked, right? Is, so if there is ritual elements there present and being used to further the abuse, right? This kind of answers that question, right? So it's where ritual elements appeared, they were incidental to already criminal abuse. So it wasn't the ritual elements that made it criminal or pushed it to a further point. The abuse already existed. The abuse was already criminal level. The other elements being there were inconsequential to whether or not the abuse was criminal, which is an important distinction to make, right? Because saying satanic ritual abuse frames the situation and saying if Satanism wasn't present or if the ritual elements weren't present, then there wouldn't be abuse. That the abuse is happening because of the necessity for the ritual. And that's inaccurate. And I struggle to think of a single spiritual system in the occult that condones, forwards, or pushes for abusive situations, for criminal activity to actually take place. Right? Now, I mean, there are satanic hate groups, right? Like, I mean, there are, far right satanic groups out there. We know that. We're very well aware of that, right? That probably are involved in, other types of criminal activity. But I mean, we're talking about like they're no different than, the Hell's Angels were, which for those that don't know, is an MC, it's a motorcycle club. And, very prominent in drug and gun running. So this is the thing though, right? So yes, that is a question, but I think that asking that question, like why the elements were present, I think from a legal standpoint, it doesn't really matter. There are probably, people that are into it the same way that the rest of us are into it, but, might use it, to justify actions. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that consider themselves Satanists or occultists that believe, that for one reason or another that, abusing their child, is going to further their ritual practice. But that still falls into the category of just child abuse and maybe religious abuse. But, to specifically label it, satanic ritual abuse, it's shaky ground at best. Right? It is a precedent that is going to frame other people like ourselves to be looked at as people that could potentially further a practice like this and cause harm because of what we believe in. Right? So I think removing the specific religion out of it is healthier because it doesn't matter what religion is present, right? Religious abuse happens. It is religious abuse. It is abuse that is that the abuser justifies through their religion. I mean, it's you know it's common, it's commonplace. People are aware that that shit happens. It's not we've been desensitized to it. So but again, religious abuse, abuse of power, right? Especially in a situation like that when we're talking about priests. Now we're talking about someone using the power dynamic, right, to perpetrate abuse, right, which is a whole other level of what we're talking about, right? But no different than when a teacher decides to have a relationship with a student. It's the same thing. It's manipulation of a power dynamic, right? So when someone is in an area of authority, they'll use that power, right, to manipulate their victim, right, into submission of their abuse, of the abuse that they want to perpetrate. So is it still religious abuse? Yes, but there's a different dynamic happening, right? So continuing forward, right? So what the data actually says about child abuse. So child sexual abuse is tragically common, usually perpetrated by someone the child knows, with no ritual branding. National stats and hotlines exist because the problem is systemic, not cinematic. And this is an important thing. This is an important distinction to make, okay? The problem is systemic. It is not cinematic. Okay? It is something that happens so often. There's a reason why there are hotlines that exist, because it happens so frequently. And it's something that we need to be aware of, right? And I feel like most of us are aware of it, but we don't consciously think about it. Like we think about it in terms of that'll never happen to us kind of thing. And unfortunately, the probability of something like that happening is much higher than most people actually think, which is why it's important to be aware of it. But then you get people like that were on this other podcast that we're reacting to essentially, and it's all Hollywood to them. It's all Hollywood to them, right? I mean, making claims of fucking child death matches in like underground Manhattan clubs with prominent individuals in society, partaking in these death matches that happen between kids. It's kind of fucking ridiculous. It's scary. The more you go through life, the more you realize just how many preds there are, people you interact with, work with, etc. Like, it still blows me. No, it does. The fact that somebody that you could be hanging out with at work could be some fucking the next Jeffrey fucking Dahmer. It's weird. It's kind of crazy. And in retrospect, they are hidden, not obvious. Yeah, of course they are. Of course, I mean, that's the whole idea of being a predator. I mean, you think about it. Think about how there's a reason we use the term predator, right? Because so predator, if we think about predator, like not the movie, but what it means in nature, right? Watch, a large cat hunting, or any, you know, um, predator in nature, how it operates, right? A praying mantis will stand still and look like a branch, right? So what it's hunting doesn't know that it's there until it's too late. You know, cheetahs and lions and tigers and shit will stalk their fucking prey, in the weeds, and then chase it down and, fucking rip it apart. But a predator, a natural predator, lays in wait, right? It's silent, it's quiet, and then it snaps. This is why the term predator is used for people like this, because they do the same thing. You don't know they are there until they want you to know that they're there. And it's terrifying, but that is why we use that term. Like, I think like in society, calling somebody a predator, we've kind of lost the impact of what the phrase actually means. Exactly. The spider doesn't chase the fly. It waits for it to fall into its web. Exactly. It's an opportunist as far as its kills, right? It's an opportunist hunter. And most predators in society operate the same way. Right? They are opportunist. They wait for an opportunity to present itself, and then they take advantage of it. Which is why most people have no fucking idea that they're talking to someone that has these ideals or operates this way. To work at a sexual assault center, telling you literally, I do not believe anyone should have their kids stay the night at someone else's home. I completely agree with you. I have an 11-year-old son. He has never spent the night at a friend's house, nor would I ever allow it to happen. Precisely for that reason. The more you allow your child to kind of spend time away from you, the more opportunity there is for something to happen. Right? I would not trust anyone with my kid, like, ever. Like, not even teachers. It's just, yep, nope. So, framing abuse as the Satanists did it lets everyday institutions and offenders off the hook. And in my opinion, that's not justice. That's misdirection, right? Of course, most definitely. Like what to watch out for. How to react when something happens. Those are important lessons. That need to happen. But I do think that, like, when you frame something as like the Satanists did it, or the devil made them do it type of thing, or the devil's there or whatever, it does, I think it lets the offender off the hook, right? They're no longer taking responsibility for what it is that they've done. It's the devil made them do it type of thing. And again, I don't think that that's justice, because I think it's just misdirection. It's moving things a different way. So that's my pleasure. My pleasure. I thought it was an important topic to talk about, because I constantly keep seeing, different Christian podcasts, talking about this particular subject. I don't think I've ever actually made kind of like a response to it. But I wanted to be very methodical with this. So, I went in. So now we're going to break down and deconstruct some of the podcast claims. So these are some of the claims that were made in the podcast, and then kind of like the rebuttal that I'm putting on it. Again, I don't want to show the podcast because I feel like that's lazy. I'll find I'll grab the link and I'll shoot it to you guys in the Discord or something, and then if you want to watch it, you can watch it. So, global satanic religion runs part of world crime trafficking, right? So, this is one claim that's made in the podcast. Evidence given, survivor anecdotes, and support networks, right? So, that's the evidence that they provided. Okay. There you go. So, that was their evidence, right? So survivor anecdotes and support networks, where support networks, said that this thing exists or whatever. So the problem, anecdotes without hard corroboration aren't proof of a coordinated, religiously mandated network. That's precisely what law enforcement reviews failed to find, right? So law enforcement did legitimately look into this, right? Like looked into claims like this. Law enforcement has never been able to substantiate the existence of a global satanic network for child trafficking or any other global satanic network that does anything, right? Criminal. These are more like cell-based type things, right? So are there like satanic groups that exist that perpetrate crime? Yeah, most definitely. But they're small little like local, setups, right? That are probably no bigger than maybe 10, 15 people. Okay. And when we talk about crime, like we're talking maybe like graffiti and shit. We're not talking about like, major fucking felonies. The next claim, this one just, I'm sorry, but it makes me laugh. It is so fucking ridiculous. Child death cage matches in underground New York clubs attended by world leaders. I mean, fuck. So, an extraordinary claim needs physical evidence, bodies, forensics, venues, financial trails, participants charged. The historic pattern in similar claims is zero verifiable evidence when investigators look. People look into this stuff. The way everyone has only been abused by a priest. Catholic religion is covered. I agree with that sentiment. I agree with that. So, again, this claim has been looked into, it's been investigated, and nothing has been found. There are no venues, there's no financial trails, because you would think that with something like that, there's large amounts of money being handed off and moved. There's nothing there that corroborates it. There's no financial records that fit, nothing. There's nothing there. So people like to sit there and think that, because they have money, they have power, and they can hide everything. When you move large amounts of money, especially in the United States, trust me, the United States knows how much money you got. They know. And when you start moving it, they know. Right? So when law enforcement has gone in and investigated this claim, nothing's turned up. No venues, there's no forensics, child death matches where the bodies, right? There's no bodies. So there's just nothing to substantiate it. The third claim. Exactly. Even Epstein got caught in the end, and he had a fucking island. The third claim, breeding compounds in Mexico to mass produce children for trafficking due to Solomonic bloodlines. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but this shit is hilarious. So bloodline mystique is a classic panic trope, right? And it is. So again, where are the raids, rescued victims, DNA evidence, indictments? Absent that, it's storytelling, not substantiation. right? And that's what all of this shit comes down to. It is storytelling, right? And you know, to my beautiful wife's point here, yes, Epstein got caught, but now people are using Epstein as an excuse to sit there and say, well, we know Epstein is real, right? We know, and that shit happened under our noses. So, you know, a global satanic cult isn't that far off. Yeah, it is. It is. I promise you. I promise you. It is. It's so far off. So easy to be an occult conspiracy grifter. I'm thinking of doing it for lulz. Moon's evil, full of lizards. No, and here's the worst thing. Here's the worst thing, right? So Dyer and I have been fairly honest about like our conservative leanings. Now I'm trying to invent a new word here because conservative doesn't fit anymore. Like I don't want to be associated with that shit. I really fucking don't. The shit that we're talking about right now, the shit that Tao Rose so wonderfully added in there, like very laughably. I don't want to be associated with this shit. Because so there are people, right? I'll give you guys an example. There are people that I used to watch and listen to, you know, on YouTube. One in particular, Blair White. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Blair White. She's rather hated in most communities at this point. And back in the day, Blair White had some, you know, interesting takes, right? And I rather enjoyed listening to, you know, what she had to say. Ever since she became a Christian, that woman has gone off, that person has gone off the fucking deep end. Everything is demonic. Everything is satanic. Everything's a fucking conspiracy theory. Right? She had somebody come on that was like supposedly a survivor of Epstein, right? Okay, right? Yeah, you know, and you know, she's sitting there like she frames this interview like nobody's talking about this. The major news organizations aren't having her come on because they're trying to cover up what the Epstein files and shit, and they don't want to talk about it and stuff like that. And like so, naturally, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm interested. All right, let's see what this woman has to say. About halfway through the fucking interview, she shows up. She shows this lizard drawing that I think like my 11-year-old could probably do a better drawing than that. Saying that she saw Epstein turn into the lizard, and I go, that is why major news outlets are not fucking interviewing this woman, because she's lost her goddamn mind. Like she's talking about everybody on the Epstein Island like they're fucking lizard people doing satanic rituals. I mean, fucking dude. Does anybody remember fucking Alex Jones? The frogs are gay because of the water. I mean, there comes a point when a conservative, when a conservative goes so far conservative that like they lose their fucking mind. Like the shit that these people believe in blows my mind. It legitimately blows my fucking mind. The shit that most of these people talk about. Like I can't. I can't. Like. Yes, but she lost her mind because they do use magic to make people who go against them crazy. Maybe. I don't know. But that just kind of correlates into like the whole cinematic shit that we're talking about here. Like, I don't understand how these people, and it's always the Christians. It's always the Christians. It's always the Christian nationalists. It's always the evangelicals, the Christian right wing have some crazy fucking ideas, man. Like real, like what the fuck? Like, I don't know what tab you're tripping on or what you smoked, but bruh, I want some. Because holy shit. And it's the same thing with this. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how to I don't know how else to put it. Like, it's like you legitimately need to stop for a second, record what you're saying, and they're doing it. Take a step back and rewatch that shit. Right? Because, bruh, the lizards are coming. The lizards are coming. Get out the tinfoil. Okay, so another claim made. Satanism is inherently about depravity. This is a big one, and again, this is the narrative that they're pushing. Right? It's not just about the religious abuse. They're using a victim that has been through some shit, that are making wildly exaggerated claims to further an agenda, to frame us or the occultist. Because when they say Satanism, this is an important distinction to make with the Christians. So when we say Satanism or Luciferianism or any specific sect of, spiritual belief, we understand the nuances that exist inside of each one of those labels. We do as occultists because we've spent time studying this shit, learning about it, talking to people in different groups. We have, this distinction. When a Christian says Satanism, they're talking about everyone, every occultist that exists on the planet. Satanists, Luciferian, Demonolator, Wiccan, right? Doesn't matter, right? Hecataean, right? Doesn't matter. All of us to them are Satanists. I remember being drunk outside Buckingham Palace and shouting, "Come out here, you fucking lizard. Bring to Queen Elizabeth." Jesus Christ. Oh. Did you get taken? Did one of the men in the funny hats tell you to leave? That would be, I would. I'm sorry, but I would pay to watch that. I think that would just be like a funny, a funny little skit. So when the Christians are referring to, no, I think the UK still had freedom of speech back then. There you go. Not anymore. So again, when the Christians or these Christian groups say Satanists, they're talking about all of us. They're talking about all occultists because to them, all of it is satanic, right? That's the thing. That's the big differential, which is why we define or make definitions before we start, right? Because when we talk about Satanism, right, at least in the popular sense of Satanism, we are specifically looking at, right, the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan. Modern published tenets and philosophical texts don't instruct crime. If an abuser slaps pentagrams on their horror show, the symbol didn't commit the felony. The human did. I'm a quarter lizard, so I take personal offense to this. Right? So, again, this is an important distinction to make here, right? So I'm going to repeat this. If an abuser slaps a pentagram on their horror show, the symbol didn't commit the felony. The human did. The person did. The person committed the crime. Queen Liz, lizard. Wow. Okay. Now, last claim from this podcast. There are hundreds of survivor videos. Therefore, the network exists. Volume does not equal verification. We've been here before. McMartin, Kern County, Ingram. Memory is suggestible. Interviews can contaminate testimony. This doesn't mean every account is false. It means you need corroboration beyond narrative. Okay? So there have been multiple accounts of people claiming shit has happened or things have gone down or whatever. But there is no corroboration. There's nothing that goes beyond the narrative that's being laid down. What about the born again lizards? Oh my God. Oh, fuck this chat. I love you, chat. You guys are awesome. So, how to discuss survivors ethically without endorsing the panic. Okay? So, center the person's pain without rubber stamping unproven cosmologies, right? Encourage reporting, trauma-informed care, and proper investigation. Believing victims means supporting evidence-based justice, not importing a religious label that history shows is a magnet for moral panics and wrongful accusations. This is the point that we're trying to make here, right? Is that it is very important to listen to the victim, but it is equally important to properly investigate. Lizard, Jesus Christ. Oh, you guys are great. You guys are great. So, anyway, in closing, occult doesn't equal organized crime. Satanism doesn't equal child abuse. When we blur those lines, real predators slip through. Protect kids with clear thinking, not campfire demons. We need to do better because essentially what this is taking people that are actual victims and turning it into a spectacle to spark a panic, to get people to react to something that isn't dangerous. So, yeah. So hopefully, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Again, all the sources, or at least 90% of them, are in the description. So feel free to go through and check them out. Lizard. So with that being said, thank you guys for coming out and hanging out and listening to me rant and rave. You guys are fucking amazing. You're the reason I do this. And as always, hail thy fucking self. See you in the next one. Peace the fuck out. Hail thy lizard self. Peace out.